This was like 9 years ago. I used to work at a gas station in Colorado for almost 2 years. I used to work at the convenience store too, because there was no need for more employees. The night was always lonely. In one specific night, I was on my late night shift on a Sunday, and there was nobody inside or outside as always. And then, I saw a car coming. It was a gray sedan, parking next to the convenience store. But as I waited for the person to step inside the store, they didn't. Nobody came out of the car for like almost 40 minutes. I was starting to get a little freaked out. At one moment, I had to use the bathroom. And when I came out, I saw that there was someone standing next to the gray car. But when I actually saw his face, something wasn't right. He was wearing a black hoodie, but I could see his face a little bit, and his eyes were really small, like almost non-existent. His mouth was probably the worst thing. He was smiling, but his mouth didn't seem really human too. It looked like he had came out straight off a creepypasta. It was crazy. And he stayed there staring at me like a creep for a while. Then, another person came to the gas station to fill up the car. So I took an opportunity. I was kind of curious to see if it was maybe somebody with bad intentions, so I came out a little to smoke a cigarette outside close to the store and see if the person maybe would need some help with something. Another dude came out of that car, and right when I greeted him and said hi, the dude in the gray sedan quickly drove off the gas station. I clearly saw it, and I got really freaked out, but I decided to stay because if something maybe happens, we had a taser in there for defense. So I got really careful. When the guy who came to fill up the car left the gas station, I thought I was going to be there alone again, and I freaking prayed for that weird creepypasta-looking ass dude to not come back. But then, there he was. His car was in the distance, and after some minutes he came back to the parking lot to the same spot he had parked before. I tried to remain calm, convincing myself that maybe he was just a prankster or someone lost looking for directions. But as the minutes ticked by and he didn't move from his spot, I felt my anxiety creeping up again. The store was eerily silent, with the only sound being the hum of the refrigerators and the occasional rustle of the wind outside. Then I decided to call my manager just to inform him about the situation. As I dialed the number, I kept an eye on the man. He was still standing there next to his car, completely still, almost like a statue. The call went straight to voicemail. I left a brief message, trying not to sound too alarmed. Then I thought it was enough. I went to the back of the store, get the taser if anything happens. And right when I got back, I glanced back at the man and he was gone. I hurried to the window, scanning the parking lot, and the gray sedan was still there, empty. Where had he gone? I stepped out of the store again, my eyes darting around, looking for any sign of him. The night was cold, and the wind sent a shiver down my spine. I walked around the corner of the building, but there was no sign of the man. I decided it was best to head back inside, lock the doors, and wait for my shift to end. As I walked back, I noticed something odd. There was a trail of muddy footprints leading from the side of the building to the store's entrance. My heart pounded as I followed them with my eyes, realizing they stopped right at the door. The man was inside. I took a deep breath, trying to calm myself, and stepped cautiously back into the store. Everything seemed normal at first glance. I walked around, checking each aisle, each corner, trying to find the intruder. Then I heard it, a faint rustling sound coming from the storage room. I grabbed the taser from under the counter and slowly approached the storage room. The door was slightly opened. I pushed it open with the taser ready, and there he was, the man in the hoodie, crouching in the corner, rummaging through a box of supplies. "Hey!" I shouted, trying to sound authoritative. "What the hell are you doing?" He turned to face me, and the sight of his twisted smile and those unnaturally small eyes made my stomach churn. He didn't say anything, just kept that eerie smile on his face. I held the taser out with my hand shaking. "Get out!" I yelled. To my surprise, he didn't move towards me. Instead, he slowly stood up and backed away, with his eyes not leaving mine for a second. He moved towards the door, and for a moment, I thought the situation had been solved. But then he did something that chilled me to the bone. He stopped at the doorway, turned back to me, smiled and yelled, "I'll be back." Then he was gone, slipping out into the night. I rushed to the door, locking it behind him. My hands were shaking so badly that it took a few tries. Once the door was locked, I collapsed into the chair behind the counter. Man, I spent the rest of my shift on super high alert. When my relief finally arrived in the morning, I was exhausted, both mentally and physically. I explained what had happened. They nodded and took the taser, saying they'd keep an eye out. I drove home, constantly checking my rearview mirror to make sure I wasn't being followed. For days, I got a little bit paranoid. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw that horrible smile, those creepy-ass eyes. I eventually quit my job at the gas station. It wasn't worth the constant fear. I never saw the man again, but every now and then, I still think if he's still out there somewhere, watching and waiting for another victim. Hey, I'm Lee. I'm gonna give you a bit of context before I start the story. I used to work night shifts at this gas station that's located in Denver when I was 20 years old, and that's where this happened. One night, when I clocked in at 7 p.m., the store was completely empty. So I thought it was going to be a really easy night because it was in a location that had almost nobody passing by at night. So, at around 11, I had only an hour left of my shift, and I figured out that I should get some work done instead of just be sitting out there. I was 20, and I worked the shift alone, which was kind of nice because it means I could just chill and do my work with nobody else. I noticed we were almost out of some peanut M&Ms, and so I'd need to go get them from our storage space, which was in the damn basement of the station. I always hated going down. That place always gave me the creeps. I was going down the steps before something fell on the other side of the room. And after that, it sounded like someone was there. I heard footsteps coming my way. I sprinted up the stairs and locked the door to the basement, panicking like a madman the entire time. When I got back upstairs, I went behind the counter to the store computer to check out the security cameras. I flicked over to the one that looks into the basement, and there was this guy literally just standing there and smiling, with his eyes right up into the camera. He had a look of absolute insanity, but he didn't look like the average junkie of the area. He was dressed in what looked to be jeans and a blue shirt. I couldn't look away from the screen. The guy's smile was so wide, it seemed inhuman. I tried to think logically to rationalize what I was seeing. Maybe it was a prank, someone trying to mess with me, but the way he just stood there, staring, sent chills down my spine. I fumbled for my phone and dialed 911, my hands shaking. 911, what's your emergency? The operator's calm voice was a stark contrast to the chaos in my mind. There's someone in the basement of the gas station I work at, I stammered. He's just standing there, staring into the camera. I don't know how he got in. The operator asked for the address and assured me that a patrol car was on its way, and she told me to stay on the line. The guy on the screen literally hadn't moved an inch. He just kept staring. I kept my eyes glued to the monitor, watching for any sign of movement. Then, as if sensing my fear, the man started to move. Slowly, he turned and walked out of view of the camera. My heart pounded in my chest. What was he doing? Was he coming upstairs? I strained to listen for any sounds, but all I could hear was the buzzing of the fluorescent lights above me. The minutes dragged by and I felt like I was going to lose my mind. Then the front door's bell chimed. I nearly screamed, but it was the police. 2 officers walked in, with their expressions serious as they approached the counter. "Are you the one who called?" one of them asked. I nodded frantically and pointed to the monitor. He was down there, in the basement. The officers exchanged glances, and one of them spoke into his radio while the other went to check the basement door. I watched as he unlocked it and descended the steps, his flashlight cutting through the darkness. The other officer stayed with me, asking questions about what I'd seen. Moments later, the officer came back up, shaking his head. "There's no one down there." Couldn't believe it. But I saw him. He was right there, staring into the camera. They asked me to show them the footage. I rewound the tape to the moment I saw the man, but as the seconds ticked by, the screen remained empty. No man, no creepy smile. Nothing. I felt like I was going insane. I swear he was there. The officers exchanged looks of sympathy, probably thinking I was just another overworked kid seeing things in the middle of the night. They told me to call again if anything else happened and left, leaving me alone in the silent store. I tried to calm down, but my mind was racing. I kept replaying the footage in my head, convinced I hadn't imagined it. I glanced at the clock. My shift was almost over. I just needed to make it through the next hour. But then I heard it again. The faint sound of footsteps from the basement. My blood ran cold. I checked the monitor again, but the camera showed nothing. Just the empty, dimly lit basement. Gathering every ounce of courage I had, I decided I had enough and grabbed a heavy flashlight to check it out myself. I couldn't spend the rest of my shift in fear. As I descended the steps, my grip tightened on the flashlight. At the bottom of the stairs, I shone the light around, illuminating the rows of shelves filled with stock. There was no sign of anyone. I was about to turn back when I noticed something on the floor. A trail of footprints. It looked like someone had stepped in white paint, and it was leading to a corner of the basement where we stored old equipment. Slowly, I followed the footprints, my breath coming in short gasps. The trail led to a large, old freezer that hadn't been used in years. My hand shook as I reached for the handle. I took a deep breath and yanked it open. The freezer was empty, except for a single, folded piece of paper at the bottom, so I picked it up. Written in smudged ink were the words, "I'm always watching." I stumbled back, dropping the paper. Panic surged through me. I raced up the stairs, not daring to look back, and locked the basement door again. I couldn't stay there another minute. Grabbing my things, I called my manager and told him I was leaving early due to a family emergency. He sounded annoyed but agreed, and that was it. I practically ran to my car and sped home, constantly checking my mirrors. I remember when I finally got to my apartment, I locked every door and window, double-checking each one. Well, life has moved on now. I quit my job the next day and found a day job instead. The fear of something bad happening was too much for me to handle. So if you work night shifts at a gas station, please be always prepared. I'll just begin the story from here. When I was 22 years old, I was in a night trip to my uncle's house in California to meet my family. There was this time when I stopped to eat at a restaurant at night, and after that I asked to a man who was in the restaurant's parking lot if he knew where was the closest gas station, and he told me about one that was pretty close, so I went for it. Well, when I got there was no one. Like literally no cars, no people. I entered the convenience store to buy some Skittles, and there was also no one working there. I found it really weird. When I was turning back to the exit to go get my car and go, a random man popped up from nowhere. He was kinda old, like almost a grandpa. He began to talk to me. He said, "Hey young lady, what are you doing in a fucked up place like this?" Then I just said, "Oh, I was just trying to buy some candy." And then Grandpa Weirdo smiled and said, "I'll help. Let me help you. I'm gonna buy them for you." But of course I just wanted to get the hell out of there ASAP. And I just said, "Thank you, I'm gonna get going." But when I was finishing the conversation, I saw something that I still fight to this day to take off my memory. The tires of my car, 2 of them were flat. I tried to stay calm, and then I remembered there was this little restaurant that was close to that gas station. So I calmly said bye to Weird Grandpa and went to that restaurant to ask for help and call the police. and luckily he didn't follow me or anything. I got there and said, "Hi, there's some weird man talking to me, and I'm pretty sure he pierced 2 of my tires. Can I stay here and call 911?" The employees said yeah, of course, and they called the cops for me. I waited nervously inside the restaurant, and the employees were kind enough to offer me a seat and a glass of water while we waited for the police to arrive. After what felt like an eternity, a patrol car finally pulled up outside. 2 officers entered the restaurant, and I immediately approached them, explaining everything that had happened. They listened attentively, then asked me to accompany them back to the gas station to check out my car. As we drove back, I felt a growing sense of dread. The gas station was as deserted as before. My car sat in the same spot, the 2 flat tires still glaringly obvious. The officers got out and began to inspect the vehicle while I stayed near the patrol car. One of the officers called me over, pointing to the puncture marks on the tires. "These were definitely slashed," he said grimly. "We'll need to take a look at the security footage inside the convenience store." They led me back inside, and of course, the old man was nowhere to be seen, as if he had vanished. The officers accessed the security footage, and we watched the grainy black and white images on the screen. There I was, entering the store, looking around for someone to help, and then, out of the shadows, the old man appeared. He had an unsettling look in his eyes as he approached me, and I could see myself backing away, clearly uncomfortable. But the footage didn't stop there. Before I went in the store, the old man saw me, and we watched as he methodically slashed my tires with a knife he pulled from his coat. And after I left, he then walked away, disappearing into the night. The officers exchanged worried glances before turning back to me. "Do you recognize this man?" one of them asked. I shook my head, feeling a chill down my spine. "No, I've never seen him before tonight." The officers decided to stay with me while we waited for a tow truck. They assured me they'd keep an eye out for the old man. After what felt like hours, the tow truck finally arrived. The driver, a burly man with a kind face, loaded my car onto the truck while the officers kept a watchful eye on the surroundings. I thanked them profusely. As we drove away from the gas station, the tow truck driver tried to lighten the mood with small talk, but my mind was elsewhere. I kept glancing out the window. Everything made my heart race. We eventually reached a nearby auto shop, and the driver assured me they'd fix my tires quickly. I sat in the waiting area, clutching my phone, ready to call my family and let them know what had happened. But before I could dial, the shop's door creaked open, and in walked the old man. Dude, I was speechless. How the hell did he follow us? My blood ran cold as he looked directly at me. He took a step closer, and I could see the glint of that knife in his hand. I froze, unable to move or speak, as he took the knife out of his coat, with that twisted smile on his face. And then, for the love of Christ, the auto shop owner, a burly man named Joe, stepped out from the back. He took one look at the old man and immediately sprang into action, grabbing a wrench from the counter. "Get out of here!" Joe yelled, brandishing the wrench threateningly. The old man hesitated for a moment before turning and fleeing into the night. Joe locked the door behind him and called the police, who arrived shortly after. This time, they managed to apprehend the old man a few blocks away. Turns out, he had a long history of harassing people at that same gas station, but had always managed to slip away before getting caught. The police thanked Joe and took the old man into custody. I finally felt a wave of relief wash over me, knowing he wouldn't be able to terrorize anyone else. By the time my car was fixed, it was early morning. Joe refused to let me pay for the repairs, so I thanked him profusely and finally headed back on the road to my uncle's house. As I drove, I couldn't help but still be a little scared, but it was all good. That was a chilling reminder of how quickly a normal trip could turn into a nightmare. Well, thankfully, there's still good people on this world. From that night on, I vowed to always be cautious and prepared, because you never know what dangers might be lurking out there.